The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was Adrian kneeling beside a hospital bed, his hands covered in blood. "Please," he whispered, "don't leave me." I stared at him for several seconds before I understood why my heart was beating so hard. This was the same man who had once watched me leave his life without taking a single step after me. The same man who had told everyone I was useless. The same man who had chosen another woman over me when I was standing right in front of him, begging him to believe me. And now he was begging me. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I remembered. I remembered everything. The first time I met Adrian, he was 23 and furious at the world. He had just taken over his father's struggling architecture firm, and everyone around him expected him to fail. I was the junior designer assigned to help him prepare a proposal for a major hotel project. I stayed 3 nights in the office with him. When he forgot to eat, I brought him food. When his presentation collapsed because of a technical error, I rebuilt half the drawings before sunrise. When he finally won the contract, he looked at me and said, "I couldn't have done it without you." I believed him. That was my first mistake. We married 2 years later. For the first few years, I thought I had married my best friend. Then Adrian's childhood friend, Vivian, returned from overseas. She was elegant, confident, and everything I wasn't. At first, I welcomed her. I even told Adrian, "You should spend time with her. You grew up together." He smiled. "You're not jealous?" "No, I meant it." I trusted him. But Vivian slowly became part of every decision. When Adrian wanted to expand the company, Vivian advised him. When he wanted to buy an apartment, Vivian helped him choose the location. When I suggested new design concepts, he began saying, "Vivian thinks that's too risky." I didn't fight. I simply worked harder. Then came a first betrayal. One evening, Adrian came home and placed a contract on the dining table. "We're removing your name from the company." I stared at him. "My name? You never officially invested money." "I invested 6 years of my life." His expression hardened. "That's not the same thing." I looked at Vivian, who was sitting beside him. She avoided my eyes. I understood then. They had already decided. I signed the papers. Not because I agreed. Because I believed Adrian would eventually realize what he had done. He didn't. A month later, I discovered something worse. Several of my original architectural designs had been submitted under Vivian's name. When I confronted Adrian, he didn't even look surprised. Vivian refined them. "They were mine." "You're being emotional." That sentence hurt more than the theft. Because I suddenly realized he wasn't confused. He simply didn't care. Still, I stayed. I told myself marriages went through difficult periods. I told myself the man I loved was buried beneath pressure, ambition, and other people's influence. Then, on the night of our anniversary, I found the final piece of the truth. I had prepared dinner. There were candles on the table. An old photograph of us sat beside 2 wine glasses. I was waiting for Adrian when his phone lit up. A message from Vivian. "He doesn't know yet, does he?" My hands went cold. Another message appeared. "Once the merger is complete, the company will finally be ours." I read it twice. Then a third time. The company, the designs, the contracts, the apartment. It had all been planned. Adrian wasn't simply allowing Vivian to take my place. He was building a future with her while keeping me around as long as I remained useful. When he came home, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions. I simply placed the phone on the table. He looked at it, then at me. For the first time in years, I saw guilt in his eyes. "Listen to me." I shook my head. "No, it's not what you think." I smiled faintly. "That's what you always say." He reached for my hand. I pulled it away. That night, I packed one suitcase. Adrian stood in the doorway. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere I can breathe." "You'll come back." I looked at him. He sounded so certain. As if my love were a door he could always leave unlocked. "You're right," I said quietly. "I probably would have." He relaxed. Then I added, "But not this time." I walked past him. He didn't stop me. He believed I would return. He had no idea that something inside me had already died. And he had no idea that the life I was about to build would make him regret letting me walk away. The next morning, I moved into a tiny rented room above a bakery on the edge of the city. It was nothing like the apartment Adrian and I had shared. The ceiling leaked. The window wouldn't close properly. At 6 every morning, the smell of bread woke me before the alarm. But for the first time in years, nobody was telling me what I was worth. I found work at a small design studio called Northline. The owner, Mr. Hale, was an older architect with silver hair and an unpleasant habit of criticizing everything. On my first day, he looked through my portfolio. "These are good." I almost smiled. Then he added, "But they're unfinished." I frowned. "Unfinished? You designed for approval." He tapped one of my drawings. "You're always asking what someone else will like. Design what you believe should exist." I didn't answer. That sentence followed me home. For years, I had designed for Adrian. I had cooked for Adrian. I had adjusted my dreams for Adrian. Even my happiness had depended on whether he was pleased with me. So I started again. Not for a company. Not for a husband. For myself. I began working on a project I had secretly dreamed about since university. Affordable homes that could be built quickly for families displaced by floods. It wasn't glamorous. There was no luxury hotel contract waiting at the end. But every line I drew felt like mine. 3 months passed. Then 6. My designs failed repeatedly. The first prototype was too expensive. The second was structurally weak. The third looked beautiful, but couldn't withstand heavy rain. I nearly gave up. Then Mr. Hale placed my drawings back on the desk. "Try again." "Why?" "Because you're finally designing like you mean it." So I tried again. And this time, something changed. I discovered a way to combine modular construction with locally available materials, cutting construction costs without sacrificing safety. Northline submitted the design to a national housing competition. I expected nothing. Instead, we won. The prize wasn't enormous, but the judges wanted to fund a pilot project. For the first time, my name appeared on a newspaper's business page. Mara Ellis, young architect behind new, affordable housing model. I stared at the headline for a long time. Mara Ellis, not Adrian's wife. Not the woman who had supposedly failed to contribute to her husband's company. Just me. Meanwhile, Adrian's world was beginning to crack. I didn't know that yet. At first, his company seemed stronger than ever. The merger with Vivian's investors went through. They celebrated. Vivian moved into the apartment I had once shared with Adrian. Everyone assumed I had disappeared because I couldn't handle losing. Then the problem started. One of the projects based on my stolen designs developed serious structural issues. The clients demanded an investigation. Vivian blamed the engineering team. The engineers blamed the original plans. And during the audit, someone asked a simple question. Who created the first version of these designs? The answer led directly to me. Adrian's face reportedly went pale when he saw my old files. Because the files contained timestamps. My drafts. My notes. My revisions. And his approval emails. He had once called those designs ordinary. Now, they were evidence. But that wasn't the worst discovery. The merger documents contained several financial transfers Vivian had made without Adrian's knowledge. She had quietly diverted money from the company into another firm. When Adrian confronted her, she didn't deny it. "You trusted me because you wanted to." He stared at her. "What does that mean?" "It means you never cared whether I was honest. You cared whether I agreed with you." Those words destroyed him because they sounded exactly like something I might have said. For the first time, Adrian began searching for me. He called my old number. It was disconnected. He visited our former apartment. I no longer lived there. He asked mutual friends. Nobody knew where I was. Then one afternoon, he saw my name on a television screen. I was standing beside a completed row of small, beautiful homes. Behind me, families were receiving their keys. The reporter asked, "What inspired you to create this project?" I looked at the camera. For a second, I thought about Adrian. Then I smiled. I realized that a home isn't valuable because someone powerful gives it to you. It's valuable because you finally have a place where you belong. Adrian was watching, and suddenly he understood. The woman he had thought would always return was gone. But he still didn't know the most important truth. I wasn't simply recovering. I was becoming someone he could no longer reach. The first time Adrian tried to find me, he went to the bakery beneath my old apartment. The owner remembered me. "You mean Mara?" she asked. Adrian nodded. "Do you know where she moved?" The woman wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him for a long moment. "No." He lowered his voice. "Please, I just need to talk to her." The baker shook her head. You should have talked to her when she was standing beside you. Adrian said nothing. That sentence stayed with him. For me, however, Adrian had already become a distant memory. The housing project had changed everything. After the first 24 homes were completed, several local governments contacted Northline, then charities, then private investors. Mr. Hale refused the first few offers. They're interested in publicity, he told me. What about the others? Find the ones interested in people. So we built carefully, slowly. I became responsible for the design division, then eventually a partner in the project company. I was still learning. I still made mistakes. Sometimes I worked until midnight and woke up convinced I'd ruined everything. But when I failed, nobody told me I was useless. They asked me what went wrong. There was a difference. One evening, after a particularly difficult meeting, I found a cup of coffee on my desk. Thought you might need this. I looked up. Daniel stood by the door. He had joined our engineering team 6 months earlier. He wasn't charming in the way Adrian had once been. Daniel was quieter. He listened more than he spoke. And, most importantly, he never made me feel as though I had earned the right to be heard. You didn't have to, I said. I know. He shrugged. That was the point. I laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in a long time. Daniel smiled. You're different when you laugh. Different from what? The person everyone sees in meetings. I looked down at the coffee. I spent a long time being serious. Then maybe you should practice being happy. I didn't answer, but I remembered his words. Meanwhile, Adrian's company was collapsing from several directions. The investigation into the stolen designs became public. Clients demanded compensation. The bank froze a portion of the company's credit. Vivian disappeared before the authorities could question her about the missing funds. And Adrian was left with something he had never experienced before. Responsibility. For years, whenever something went wrong, he had found someone else to blame. An employee, a competitor, the market, me. Now there was nobody left. He finally opened the old archive room in the company office. Inside were boxes of drawings. He found the first design I had ever made for him. The paper was yellowing. At the bottom, in small handwriting, I had written, "For the man I believe in." He sat there for nearly an hour. Then he remembered something. It had been raining the night I gave him that drawing. We had been dating for only a few months. He had been exhausted after losing a major client. I had stayed beside him on the office floor until sunrise. You know, he had said, one day I'll build something people will remember. I had smiled, and I'll design it. He had kissed my forehead. Promise? I promise. Adrian closed his eyes. That promise had once been the foundation of our marriage. He had forgotten it. I hadn't. I had simply stopped building for him. 3 weeks later, Adrian came to Northline. He waited in the lobby for nearly 2 hours. When I finally walked downstairs, I stopped. He looked different, thinner, tired. But the moment our eyes met, I saw the old Adrian hiding beneath the exhaustion. Mara, I said nothing. He took one step toward me. I've been trying to find you. I know. You knew. People talk. He swallowed. I need to explain. No. His face tightened. Please. I looked at him calmly. You've had years to explain. I was wrong. Yes. I betrayed you. Yes. I let Vivian manipulate me. I shook my head. Don't give her all the blame. He froze. You made your choices, Adrian. He looked down. I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I never expected. I miss you. My chest tightened. Not because I wanted him back. Because once, those words would have been enough to make me forgive everything. I remember the old apartment, the anniversary dinner, the suitcase, his voice saying, "You'll come back." I looked at him and realized something. He wasn't asking for the woman he had lost. He was asking for the woman who had once made his life easier. That woman was gone. I hope you find peace, I said. Then I walked away. He didn't follow. But the next morning, I received a message from an unknown number. Please give me one chance to make things right. I deleted it. Another message arrived. I know I don't deserve you. I deleted that too. The third message was different. There is something you don't know about what happened before you left. My hand stopped. For the first time in months, curiosity won over indifference. I opened the message. There was only one sentence. Vivian didn't act alone. I stared at those 3 words until the screen dimmed. Vivian didn't act alone. I had assumed Adrian's betrayal was simple. He had chosen her. He had trusted her. He had allowed her to erase me from the company. That was painful enough. But if someone else had been involved, who? I called the number. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Then a message arrived. Meet me tomorrow at 6. The old train station cafe. Come alone. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I went. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. A man in a gray coat sat in the corner. I recognized him after several seconds. Marcus, Adrian's former financial director. He had resigned shortly after I left. You, I said. He stood. I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that. He nodded. I know. He placed a folder on the table. I found these after Vivian disappeared. I opened it. Inside were copies of internal emails. Some were from Vivian. Some were from Adrian. But several were from another account. An outside consulting firm. The messages discussed my removal from the company months before Adrian had officially told me. I kept reading. My hands slowly became cold. They hadn't merely planned to remove me from the company. They had planned to make me look incompetent. False performance reports. Fabricated complaints. Anonymous claims that my designs were copied from other architects. I looked at Marcus. Why? Because Vivian wanted your reputation destroyed. And Adrian? Marcus hesitated. He approved the reports. I closed the folder. That hurt. Not because I was surprised, but because some small part of me had still hoped there was a misunderstanding. There wasn't. Adrian had known. He had signed the documents. He had helped create the version of me everyone was supposed to believe. Marcus lowered his voice. I tried to stop it. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. I understood. Fear was not an excuse. But it was human. I stood. Thank you for showing me. You're not going to confront him? No. He looked confused. Why? Because I already know what he did. I left the cafe with the folder under my arm. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the documents again. Then I found something unexpected. A payment record. A large transfer had been made from Adrian's company to the consulting firm. The payment date was 3 days before our anniversary. 3 days before the dinner where I discovered Vivian's messages. I stared at the date. Then another memory surfaced. Adrian had come home late that week. He had hugged me from behind while I was cooking. I've been busy, he'd said. I had laughed. Too busy for our anniversary. Never. He had kissed my cheek. I remembered how safe I had felt. Now the memory felt like a photograph taken in a burning house. I cried that night. Not because I wanted him. Because I finally understood how long I had been deceived. The next morning, Daniel found me sitting alone outside the office. You don't have to talk about it, he said. I know. He sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I told him everything. He listened. When I finished, he didn't say, he'll regret it. He didn't say, you deserve better. He simply said, I'm sorry you had to carry that alone. Something inside me loosened. I looked at him. Why don't you tell me what I should do? Because it's your life. That answer stayed with me. A few weeks later, our company received an offer from a major international development group. They wanted to purchase a controlling share of our housing technology. The amount was enough to make Northline financially secure for decades. But accepting would mean losing control of the mission. Mr. Hale asked me what I thought. I looked at the documents, then at the models on the table. I don't want to sell. He smiled. I hoped you'd say that. Instead, we negotiated a partnership. I became the chief design director of a new organization focused on disaster-resistant, affordable housing. My name appeared on the founding documents. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's assistant, as the person who had built the system. The announcement spread quickly, and Adrian saw it. This time, he didn't feel anger. He felt something worse. He realized that while he had spent the last year trying to recover the company he had nearly destroyed, I had built something entirely new, something that didn't need him. Then came the final shock. A journalist investigating the old scandal discovered that Vivian had secretly transferred several stolen design patents into an overseas company. The patents were based on my work. The legal team contacted me. I could have destroyed Adrian's company with one lawsuit. Instead, I chose a different path. I claimed ownership of my designs. I asked for the stolen rights to be returned. I did not demand Adrian's downfall. The court eventually confirmed that the original work belonged to me. The The stolen patents were transferred back. Adrian lost the last valuable assets connected to Vivian's scheme. But I didn't celebrate. I simply signed the papers. When the lawyer asked, "Do you want to pursue additional damages?" I thought for a moment. "No. Are you sure?" "Yes. I wanted my work back. I didn't need his suffering." That evening, Daniel found me standing outside the courthouse. "You look relieved." "I am." "Finished." I looked at the building behind me. "With them?" I smiled. "No. With needing them to admit I was worth something." Daniel didn't answer. He only held out his hand. I looked at it. Then slowly I took it. For the first time, I wasn't reaching for someone who was walking away. I was walking forward with someone who had never asked me to prove I deserved to stay. By the time winter arrived, I had stopped checking whether Adrian had contacted me. That was how I knew I was finally free. Not because I hated him, not because I had forgotten him, but because his silence no longer made me wonder whether I had been forgotten. My life had become busy in ways I never expected. Our housing program expanded into 3 provinces. We began training local builders, creating jobs alongside homes. I traveled constantly, sometimes sleeping in cheap hotels and sometimes on construction site floors. It was exhausting. It was also mine. One evening, I returned from a remote project and found Daniel waiting outside my apartment. He held 2 paper bags. I brought dinner. I smiled. "You know I can cook." "I know." "Then why?" "Because you're tired." I took the bags. "You're getting predictable." That sounds like a compliment. It wasn't. He smiled. We ate on the floor because I still hadn't bought a proper dining table. Daniel looked around my apartment. "You've been here nearly a year." "I've been busy." "You have 3 chairs." "I have 3 guests." "I see your point." I laughed. Then he became serious. "Mara, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever think about going back?" I knew exactly what he meant. I put down my fork. "Sometimes." His expression changed. "Why?" "Because memories don't disappear just because people hurt you." He nodded. "But do you want to?" I looked at him. "No." The answer came easily. That surprised me. For a long time, I had believed healing meant forgetting Adrian. It didn't. Healing meant remembering him without wanting the old life back. Daniel smiled. "Good, good. I was worried you'd say yes." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you jealous?" "A little." I laughed again. It felt strange. Easy. Safe. Then my phone rang. It was Mr. Hale. "Mara, turn on the news." I did. The headline made me freeze. Former Hartwell Group director Adrian Vale announces company restructuring after major financial losses. The reporter continued. Following a series of lawsuits and financial disputes, Adrian Vale has reportedly sold his remaining luxury property to stabilize the company. Daniel watched my face. "You okay?" "Yes." But then the screen changed. A photograph appeared. Adrian standing outside a courthouse. He looked older than I remembered. The reporter mentioned another development. Sources say Vale has also agreed to testify in the ongoing investigation into the fraudulent transfer of intellectual property involving former executive Vivian Cross. I turned off the television. "That chapter is over," I said. Daniel nodded. But the next morning, Adrian called me himself. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he said, "I heard about the new project." "Congratulations," I replied automatically. He gave a quiet laugh. "You're still polite." "I don't see the point in being cruel." I deserved cruelty. "No." He breathed slowly. "I've been thinking about what you said at Northline." "Which part?" "That I made my choices." I said nothing. "I spent a long time blaming Vivian," he continued. "But the truth is, she couldn't have betrayed you without me." I closed my eyes. He was finally saying the words I had wanted to hear years ago, and they meant almost nothing now. "I know," I said. Yes." "Can I see you?" I hesitated. "Why?" "Because there are things I need to tell you face to face." I almost refused, but something in his voice made me pause. "Tomorrow," I said. "Thank you." When I arrived at the cafe the next afternoon, Adrian was already there. He stood when he saw me. For a moment, neither of us moved. I remembered another cafe, another version of us. When I had been 24, Adrian had brought me here after my first major project won an award. He had given me a small silver bracelet. You'll go far, he'd said. I had smiled. Only if you come with me. Now the bracelet was gone. I hadn't worn it in years. Adrian pulled out a chair. He said, I won't take much of your time, he said. Good. He smiled sadly. You haven't changed. I have. He looked at me. Yes, he whispered. You have. He reached into his coat and placed a small envelope on the table. I didn't touch it. What is it? Your old wedding ring. I stared at him. I found it in the office. I frowned. Why was it there? I had kept it after you left. He pushed it toward me. I thought if I kept it, you'd come back someday. I didn't open the envelope. Adrian. I know. He looked down. I know I have no right to ask for anything. Then don't. His eyes lifted. I still love you. The words were quiet. No performance. No manipulation. And somehow that made them harder to hear. I looked at him for a long moment. Maybe you do. He seemed surprised. But love isn't enough, I continued. His face fell. I know. No, you don't. I spoke gently. You loved me when I made your life easier. You loved me when I supported your ambition. But when loving me required you to stand against someone else, you chose convenience. His eyes reddened. I was weak. Yes. I regret it. I believe you. That was the hardest thing I had ever said. Because I did believe him. I believed Adrian regretted losing me. I believed he finally understood what he had destroyed. But understanding the damage didn't rebuild the house. He leaned forward. Then give me one chance. I shook my head. I already gave you hundreds. He looked away. The silence between us lasted nearly a minute. Then he whispered, Is there someone else? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His eyes moved toward the window. Daniel was standing outside. He wasn't watching us. He was waiting. Adrian followed my gaze. And for the first time, I saw something almost childlike in his expression. Fear. Not fear of losing a business. Not fear of losing money. Fear that someone else had become the person I chose. Adrian looked back at me. Do you love him? I thought about the question. Then I answered honestly. I don't know yet. Adrian swallowed. But I'm learning what it feels like to be with someone who doesn't make me afraid. He closed his eyes. That hurt him more than any insult could have. Because I wasn't telling him Daniel was better. I was telling him that peace had become more valuable to me than passion. When I stood, Adrian reached for my hand. He stopped himself before touching me. That small gesture told me more than any apology. He finally understood a boundary. Goodbye, Adrian. He looked up. Is that really it? I nodded. Yes. I walked outside. Daniel looked at me. Are you okay? I nodded. Then he took my hand. This time, I didn't hesitate. Behind us, Adrian remained seated alone. He watched through the glass as I walked away. And for the first time, he understood something I had learned months earlier. People don't always leave because they stop loving you. Sometimes they leave because loving you has become too painful. 3 months later, the new housing center opened. It was the largest project I had ever led. There were workshops, training rooms, a design laboratory, and a small community library. The first building had my original sketches framed on the wall. Not because I wanted praise, because I wanted young designers to see that good work could come from failure. During the opening ceremony, a little girl approached me. Are you the person who designed our house? I knelt. Yes. She smiled. My mother says you gave us a future. I shook my head. No, your mother built the future. I only helped make the house. She thought about that. Then she hugged me. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I remembered the woman I had been. The woman who had once stood in a beautiful apartment waiting for a husband who didn't come home. She would never have imagined this. After the ceremony, Daniel found me on the roof. You disappeared. I needed air. He stood beside me. Big day. Very. He looked at the city. You know what I realized? What? You're still afraid. I laughed. That's your romantic confession? No. He turned toward me. You're afraid that happiness will disappear. I became quiet. He continued. You keep waiting for something to go wrong. I looked at my hands. Maybe he was right. I had spent so long surviving betrayal that peace sometimes frightened me more than conflict. What if it does? I asked. Then we'll deal with it. If you want. I looked at him. He wasn't promising forever. He wasn't demanding anything. He was simply offering to stand beside me. That was enough. I said. Daniel smiled. Then I suppose I should take you to dinner. You brought me dinner before. Then I'll bring better dinner. That sounds expensive. I've been promoted. I laughed. That night, we went to a small restaurant near the river. No photographers. No business partners. No grand proposal. Just two people learning each other slowly. Daniel asked about my childhood. I told him about my father teaching me to draw houses on newspaper. I told him how I used to build tiny rooms from cardboard. He listened. Then he asked, "Did Adrian know?" "Yes." "What did he think?" I smiled faintly. "He used to say I was wasting time." Daniel looked at me. Then he was wrong. I know. It was a simple sentence, but saying it felt powerful. I knew my value now. I didn't need Adrian to admit it. I didn't need Vivian to apologize. I didn't need the people who had underestimated me to suddenly become impressed. The next year brought challenges. A major investor withdrew. Construction costs increased. One of our pilot structures failed a safety inspection. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. But I didn't collapse. I called the engineering team. We investigated. We rebuilt. We fixed the design. The project opened 4 months late. Nobody called me a genius. Nobody called me a failure. They simply called me responsible. And strangely, that meant more. Then, one afternoon, I received an invitation to a national architecture conference. The keynote speaker was supposed to be someone else. He canceled. They asked me to replace him. I almost refused. Public speaking terrified me. Daniel looked at the invitation. "You should go. I'll embarrass myself." "Probably." I stared at him. He smiled. "But you'll survive." So I went. The auditorium was full. Hundreds of architects, investors, students, and journalists were watching. I stood at the podium. My hands trembled. Then I saw a young woman in the front row holding one of my early sketches. She looked nervous. I understood her immediately. So I began with the truth. I spent many years believing that being useful was the same as being valuable. The room became quiet. I thought if I worked harder, forgave faster, and asked for less, people would love me more. I paused. They didn't. Nobody moved. But I learned something better. I looked across the audience. Your worth doesn't increase because someone finally recognizes it. It was there before they noticed. The applause came slowly, then louder. I didn't cry. I smiled. After the speech, I stepped backstage. A familiar voice said, "That was beautiful." I turned. Adrian. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked healthier than before. Still tired, but calmer. "You came. I wanted to hear you speak." I smiled politely. "Thank you." He looked toward the stage. "I heard what you said. I meant it." "I know." He took a breath. "I finally understand why you left." I didn't respond. "I thought you left because you stopped loving me." He looked at me. "But you left because you finally started loving yourself." My eyes stung. That was the closest he had ever come to understanding me. I nodded. "Yes." He smiled sadly. "I'm glad." Those 2 words surprised me. "Why?" "Because if you had stayed, you might never have become this person." I looked at him. For the first time, there was no expectation in his eyes. No demand. No attempt to pull me backward. Just regret. And perhaps acceptance. He extended his hand. "Goodbye, Mara." I shook it. "Goodbye, Adrian." He walked away. I watched him disappear into the crowd. Then Daniel came beside me. Was that closure? I thought about it. No. He raised an eyebrow. What was it? I looked toward the stage. Proof that I don't need closure from him anymore. Daniel smiled. Outside, the city lights were beginning to shine. I took his hand and walked toward the future. 2 years passed before Adrian came back into my life for the 4th time. By then, I had stopped counting. The difference was that this time, he wasn't asking me to return. He was asking me to save something else. Northline had received a government contract to rebuild several communities after a devastating coastal storm. Our organization was chosen to lead the architectural planning, but one of the regional construction companies involved in the project was Hartwell Group, Adrian's company. When I saw his name on the partnership documents, I nearly rejected the contract. Mr. Hale noticed. "You don't have to prove anything." "I know." "Then don't make a decision based on him." I looked at the document again. That was the problem. For years, Adrian had been at the center of my decisions. Even when I hated him, I was still reacting to him. I didn't want that anymore. So I accepted the contract. Our first meeting was held in a conference room overlooking the harbor. Adrian entered last. He stopped when he saw me. I was already seated at the head of the design team. He gave a small nod. Mara, Adrian. Nothing more. The meeting began. He was professional. So was I. For 3 hours, we discussed budgets, materials, timelines, safety standards, and logistics. Not once did he mention our marriage. Not once did I mention Vivian. When the meeting ended, Adrian approached me. I'll keep our history out of this project. Good. I mean it. I know. He looked relieved. Then he asked, do you still trust me professionally? I considered the question. I trust contracts. He gave a quiet laugh. Fair enough. The project moved forward. At first, everything went smoothly. Then we discovered that Hartwell Group had serious financial problems. Their cash reserves were almost gone. If they withdrew from the project, thousands of families would be delayed. The board wanted to replace them, but finding another contractor would take months. I could feel the old temptation returning. Fix it. Protect everyone. Take responsibility for another person's mistake. It was what I had always done. Then Adrian came to my office. I'll step down. I looked up. What? From the project. You'll lose the company. Maybe. He placed a folder on my desk. I've already transferred the construction division to an independent management team. They can finish without me. I stared at him. Why? Because I don't want you to sacrifice your project to save me. I didn't know what to say. He continued. Years ago, I expected you to clean up every mess I made. He looked down. I won't do that again. For the first time, I saw something different in him. Not desperation. Accountability. I still didn't trust him, but I respected the choice. We'll restructure the contract, I said. He nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. A faint smile appeared. There you are. I frowned. What? The woman who used to argue with me about everything. I almost smiled. She never disappeared. No, he said. I just stopped listening. The project continued. Adrian stepped back, and, unexpectedly, the new management team performed better than anyone expected. For the first time, I saw evidence that Adrian was changing without needing me to reward him for it. That mattered. But the storm project brought another surprise. During construction, we discovered a school building that had been severely damaged. The local children had been studying in temporary shelters. I decided to redesign the entire school instead of merely repairing it. The budget was tight. Daniel helped me find a way to use recycled structural materials. We worked late for weeks. One night, while reviewing drawings, Daniel looked at me. You're happy. I paused. Am I? Yes. How can you tell? You don't complain when you're happy. I laughed. I complain constantly. Exactly. But when you're unhappy, you go quiet. I stared at him. He knew me too well. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Mara, yes. I love you. The words were simple. No dramatic music. No flowers. No perfect setting. Just a construction office at midnight, with blueprints scattered across the table. I smiled. I love you too. He squeezed my hand. Good. That's all you have to say? I've been waiting 2 years. I prepared a much longer speech. I laughed. I'm glad you didn't use it. He leaned closer. Me too. For the first time, saying those words didn't frighten me. Because this love didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a door I could open or close myself. The next morning, Adrian learned about our relationship. He didn't react publicly. But later, he sent one message. I'm glad you found someone who knows how to keep your heart safe. I read it twice, then deleted it. Not because I was angry, because I didn't need to keep it. The past no longer needed souvenirs. A month later, the school opened. Children ran through the new classrooms. Parents stood outside crying. One elderly woman took my hands. My granddaughter can finally study somewhere safe. I smiled. That's what this was for. She looked toward the building, then back at me. Who helped you? I glanced at Daniel. My team. That answer felt right. I had spent years believing I had to carry everything alone. Now I understood something else. Independence didn't mean refusing help. It meant choosing who was allowed to help you. And for the first time in my life, I had chosen freely. The Storm Project ended 6 months later. Our work received national recognition, but the award mattered less to me than what happened afterward. The government asked our organization to create a permanent disaster housing program. Mr. Hale offered me the position of executive director. I stared at him. You're serious? You've been doing the job for 2 years. I thought you were never retiring. I am not. Then why give it to me? He smiled. Because eventually, even stubborn old men have to admit when someone is better at something than they are. I laughed. I accepted. That evening, Daniel took me to the river. He had arranged a small dinner on a rooftop overlooking the water. I knew something was different the moment I saw the table. You're suspicious, he said. Very. Good. He took a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. Daniel. I know. He opened it. Inside was not a ring. It was a tiny metal model of a house. I laughed in relief. You scared me. I wanted to. He handed it to me. I made this. You made this. Badly. It looks beautiful. He smiled. I know what a house means to you. I held the little model. A place you can leave, he said, and still know you can come home. My eyes filled with tears. Then he took out a second box. This time, there was a ring. Mara, I don't want to own your future. He looked directly at me. I want to build one beside you, if you'll let me. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the woman I had been. The woman who had mistaken control for love. The woman who had begged to be chosen. The woman who believed marriage meant enduring anything. Then I looked at Daniel. He wasn't asking me to surrender my life. He was asking me to share it. Yes, I whispered. His smile broke across his face. Yes. Yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger. For the first time, a ring didn't feel like a promise to stay no matter what. It felt like a promise to stay because I wanted to. We didn't announce our engagement immediately. There was no reason to. Our happiness belonged to us. But Adrian found out eventually. A mutual acquaintance told him. He didn't contact me. Instead, he sent a gift to the new office. A framed photograph. It was an old picture of me standing beside my first major design. On the back, he had written, "You were always capable of more than I understood." I placed the photograph in a storage box. I didn't throw it away. I didn't display it. Some things belonged in neither the heart nor the trash. They belonged in the past. Then, unexpectedly, Adrian's company began recovering. Not because of me, because he finally stopped pretending he could do everything himself. He hired competent managers, paid the debts he could afford, cooperated with investigators, and admitted publicly that his former company had benefited from intellectual property that was not his. His reputation never fully recovered. It shouldn't have, but he rebuilt enough to keep hundreds of employees from losing their jobs. I heard about it through the news. I felt no satisfaction, only a strange quietness. He had become a better man, just not for me. That was the truth I had once been unable to accept. Sometimes people change after losing you. Sometimes they finally understand your value after you are gone. And sometimes that change is real. But real change does not create an obligation for you to return. One evening, Adrian called. I almost let it ring. Then I answered. Hello. Mara. His voice was steady. I won't keep you long. Okay. I wanted to thank you. For what? For not destroying me when you had every reason to. I leaned back. I didn't save you. I know. You saved yourself. He was silent. Then he said, You're right. Another silence. Finally, he asked the question I knew was coming. Do you ever regret leaving? I looked at the ring on my finger. No. The answer was immediate. He breathed in slowly. I thought you might say that. I don't regret loving you. He didn't speak. I regret abandoning myself to keep loving you. His voice cracked. I understand. I hope you do. He laughed softly. You know what the worst part is? What? I used to think you were too forgiving. I said nothing. Now I realize you were just giving me chances I didn't deserve. I closed my eyes. Goodbye, Adrian. Goodbye, Mara. The call ended. I sat there for a long time. Then Daniel walked into the room. Everything okay? I nodded. Yes. He kissed my forehead. Come on. Where? Dinner. I have work. You always have work. That's because I'm important. He smiled. Very. I shut my laptop. As we walked outside, I looked back at the office. My name was written on the glass door. Mara Ellis, Executive Director. For years, I had dreamed of seeing my name somewhere important. I had imagined Adrian standing beside me. Now he wasn't. And somehow, the dream was still complete. Maybe that was the greatest lesson I had learned. A dream doesn't become smaller because the person you imagined beside you is no longer there. Sometimes it finally becomes yours. The morning I got married to Daniel, Adrian was not invited. That sounds obvious. It wasn't. For months, I had wondered whether leaving him in the past meant pretending he had never existed. Eventually, I realized I didn't need to erase anything. My past had shaped me. It simply no longer had the right to direct me. The wedding was small. No celebrity guests. No extravagant ballroom. Just family, close friends, and the people who had stood beside me when my life was falling apart. Mr. Hale gave the opening toast. He raised his glass and said, "Tamara, who finally learned that asking for help doesn't make you weak." Everyone laughed. I smiled. Then Daniel stood. He looked nervous. I had never seen him nervous before. He held my hand. "I don't promise that life will always be easy." He paused. "I promise something better. If life becomes difficult, you won't have to face it alone." My eyes filled with tears. I whispered, "That's enough." After the wedding, Daniel and I moved into a modest house near the new housing center. It wasn't the kind of house Adrian and I had once dreamed about. It was smaller. There was a garden, a workshop, a library, and a kitchen where Daniel repeatedly burned breakfast. I loved it. For the first time, home wasn't a place I had to maintain for someone else. It was a place where I could breathe. Months passed. Then I received a letter. It was from Adrian. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. There was no apology, no request, only a short message. "I'm leaving the city. The company is stable enough to continue without me. I'm going to work with a foundation that helps rebuild communities after disasters." I read the sentence twice. Then I reached the final line. "I finally understood why you chose this work. You weren't trying to build houses. You were trying to give people what you once needed, a place where they didn't have to beg to belong." I sat quietly. He was right, but he had understood too late. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Daniel found me there. "Adrian." "Yes. Do you want to talk?" I shook my head. "Not really." He kissed my shoulder. "Okay." That was it. No jealousy. No interrogation. No insecurity. Just trust. I realized then how different my life had become. With Adrian, every silence had been a question. With Daniel, silence was simply silence. A year after our wedding, our organization launched its largest project yet. A new town for families displaced by flooding. Thousands of people would live there. Schools, clinics, parks, workshops, small businesses. Everything I had once dreamed of building. I stood at the site on the first morning of construction. The land stretched toward the horizon. Daniel stood beside me. "You did it." I shook my head. "We did." He smiled. "No." He pointed toward the workers. "They did." I laughed. "You're impossible. I married an architect. Someone has to keep her humble." I looked at the empty land. For a second, a memory came back. The old office. The first drawing. Adrian saying, "One day I'll build something people remember." I used to think that promise had been stolen from me. Now I understood. It hadn't been. I had simply built something different. Something better. The project faced its first major crisis 6 months later. A funding partner withdrew after a financial scandal. Construction stopped. Hundreds of workers were waiting for payment. The board panicked. Someone suggested selling part of the organization. Another suggested postponing the project indefinitely. I sat at the conference table listening. Then I said no. Everyone looked at me. "We don't abandon the people who are already depending on us." One director asked, "Then what do you propose?" I looked at the financial reports. We restructure. The next 6 weeks were brutal. I negotiated with banks, cut unnecessary costs, paused expansion, sold and used equipment, reached out to smaller investors. I worked 14-hour days. But this time, I didn't carry everything alone. Daniel handled logistics. Mr. Hale advised the board. Our engineers redesigned several phases. The community leaders helped us negotiate locally. Slowly, the project moved again. When the first families finally received their keys, I stood outside the community center. A man approached me. He was carrying a little boy. My son was afraid we'd never have a home again. I smiled. Now he does. The boy looked at me. "Did you build it?" I laughed. "Not by myself." He nodded seriously. Then he handed me a small paper drawing. It showed a house, a tree, 3 people standing outside. At the bottom, he had written, "Home." I held the drawing against my chest. That night, I put it beside my bed. Years ago, I had thought success meant proving Adrian wrong. Now I knew better. Success was this: a child drawing a house because he believed he would be safe inside it. That was enough. Then, just as life seemed peaceful, a call came from an unknown number. "Mara." "Yes." "This is Daniel's mother." My heart skipped. She sounded frightened. "There's been an accident." Everything inside me went cold. "Where is he?" "He's at St. Vincent's." I grabbed my coat. "Is he conscious?" A pause. "No." I couldn't breathe. For one terrible second, the old fear returned. The fear of losing the person I loved. The fear of being abandoned. The fear of standing alone again. But this time, I didn't run from the fear. I faced it. I drove to the hospital. And when I entered the emergency room, I saw someone I never expected to see. Adrian. He was standing beside Daniel's hospital bed. His shirt was stained with blood. And when he saw me, he stepped forward. "Ma." I looked at him. "What happened?" His voice broke. "I was there." Then he said the words that changed everything. I couldn't save him. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The hospital seemed to disappear around me. "What happened?" I asked again. Adrian looked at the floor. Daniel was leaving the construction site. He swallowed. A truck lost control at the intersection. My legs weakened. I grabbed the back of a chair. "Is he?" "He's alive." I closed my eyes. A breath escaped me. "He has internal injuries. The doctors are operating." I looked through the glass. Daniel lay motionless beneath the harsh white lights. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to trade places with him. I wanted to bargain with the universe. Instead, I stood there. Adrian remained beside me. For once, he didn't try to touch me. He didn't tell me everything would be fine. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He simply stood there. Hours passed. The operation continued. At some point, I realized Adrian was still there. "You should go." "No, you don't need to stay." "I know." I looked at him. "Then why?" He answered quietly. "Because years ago, you stayed when I didn't deserve it." I didn't respond. "You don't owe me anything," he continued. "But tonight, I don't want you sitting alone." I looked through the glass again. For the first time since I had known Adrian, I wasn't angry with him. I was simply tired. "Sit down," I said. He did. We waited. Near dawn, the surgeon came out. "He's alive." I nearly collapsed. "But he has a long recovery ahead." I nodded. "Can I see him?" "In a few minutes." The doctor left. I covered my face with my hands. Adrian stood. "Mara." I looked up. "You're going to be okay." I almost laughed. "You don't know that." "No." He looked toward Daniel's room. "But I know you." I didn't understand. "You've survived worse." I stared at him. Then I realized he wasn't saying I was strong because he wanted me to suffer. He was saying it because he finally knew me. Daniel woke 2 days later. His first words were barely audible. "Mara." I took his hand. "I'm here." He smiled weakly. "Did I ruin the project?" I laughed through tears. "Of course." He closed his eyes. "Good." I kissed his forehead. "You scared me." "Sorry. You're not allowed to do that again." "I'll try." His recovery took months. Adrian visited once. He stood at the hospital doorway. Daniel looked at him. "You saved my life." Adrian shook his head. "No. You called the ambulance." "That isn't saving you." Daniel smiled faintly. "It mattered." Adrian nodded. Then he looked at me. "I'll leave you two alone." Before he turned, I said, "Adrian." He stopped. "Thank you." He looked surprised. "You're welcome." Then he walked away. Daniel watched him disappear. "You're not going back to him, are you?" I laughed. "No." "Good." He closed his eyes. "I'd hate to survive all that just to lose you." I held his hand. "You're stuck with me." Months later, Daniel returned to work. He moved slowly at first. We changed our lives. Less rushing. More dinners at home. More weekends without phones. More ordinary mornings. The accident taught me something I hadn't understood before. Life wasn't a contract. Nothing was guaranteed. So I stopped postponing happiness. I took Daniel on the trip we had talked about for years. We walked through small towns. We stayed in quiet hotels. We argued about directions. We laughed when we got lost. It wasn't extraordinary. It was perfect. When we returned, I found another letter waiting. Adrian again. This time, I opened it immediately. Mara, I'm leaving tomorrow. I used to think losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was wrong. The worst thing was becoming someone who could hurt a person who loved me. I can't change what I did. I can't ask you to forgive me. But I can make sure I never become that person again. Take care of yourself. And take care of the man who taught you that love doesn't have to hurt. Goodbye. I finished reading. Then I folded the letter. Daniel watched me. You okay? Yes. Sad. A little. Do you still love him? I thought carefully. I don't know if what I feel has a name. He nodded. I continued. But I don't want him back. Daniel smiled. That was the answer I needed. I leaned against him. Outside, the evening sky turned gold. Somewhere far away, Adrian was beginning another life. Not mine. Not ours. His. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for what happened to him next. I had spent years trying to save someone who didn't know how to value me. Now I understood the title of my own life. I didn't need to save him. I needed to stop abandoning myself. And that was the one promise I would never break again. 5 years after I left Adrian, I stood on a stage beneath a banner carrying my name. Not because I had asked for it, because the city had decided to name its new community design center after me. I found the idea embarrassing. It's too much, I told Daniel. He adjusted his tie. You built half the thing. The other half was funded by the city. They didn't name it after the city. I laughed. You're enjoying this. Very much. The auditorium was full. Students, architects, community leaders, families from the housing projects, and people I had never met filled the seats. Mr. Hale sat in the front row. He was older now. His hair was almost completely white. While I walked toward the podium, he stood and applauded first. Everyone followed. I looked at the crowd. 5 years earlier, I had believed my life was over because one man had decided I wasn't worth choosing. Now hundreds of people were standing because they believed my work mattered. The difference was almost impossible to explain. I began my speech simply. 5 years ago, I thought losing someone meant losing my future. The room became quiet. I was wrong. I looked toward Daniel. He smiled. Sometimes losing the wrong person is the first time you become available for your own life. The applause came before I finished. Afterward, several students approached me. One young woman asked, "How did you become confident?" I almost laughed. I didn't. She looked confused. I became willing to be afraid and continue anyway. That answer was more honest. Confidence had never arrived like a gift. It had been built slowly, one difficult decision at a time. That evening, Daniel and I walked home. The streets were quiet. He held my hand. Happy? Yes. Completely? I thought about it. Almost. He smiled. What's missing? I looked up at the night sky. Nothing. I realized what I had meant. There was no missing piece. No old apology I needed. No final conversation waiting to happen. No part of my past that needed to be rewritten. I had spent years imagining that closure would come from Adrian saying the right words. But closure had arrived quietly. It looked like a normal dinner. A house with warm lights. A husband who knew when to speak and when to listen. A career I had built with my own hands. A life filled with people who didn't need me to disappear so they could feel important. That night, I received one final message from Adrian. He was leaving the country permanently. He had accepted a position with an international disaster relief foundation. The message was short. I saw the ceremony. I'm proud of you. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. I used to think you left because you stopped loving me. Now I understand you left because you finally loved yourself enough to go. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Because there was nothing left to say. I placed the phone down. Daniel looked at me. Adrian. Yes. Everything okay? I smiled. Yes. And I meant it. 2 months later, we traveled to the first housing community I had ever designed. The little homes had aged well. Children who had once received keys from my hands were now teenagers. One of them recognized me. You're Mara. I laughed. You remember me? You gave my family a house. I shook my head. Your family built the life inside it. He smiled. Then he pointed toward a taller building. I'm studying engineering there. My heart filled with warmth. That was when I understood what success really meant. Not awards. Not money. Not headlines. Not making Adrian regret losing me. Success was seeing someone who had once needed help become capable of helping others. That night, Daniel and I sat outside one of the houses. I told him about the first time I had drawn a house for Adrian. I thought he was my future, I said. Daniel squeezed my hand. And now, I looked at the rows of warm windows. Now I know the future isn't a person. He smiled. What is it? A direction. I leaned against his shoulder. And I like where we're going. Years ago, Adrian had begged me to stay because he couldn't imagine his life without me. I had once thought that was proof of love. Now I knew better. Love wasn't someone saying, I can't live without you. Love was someone saying, I want you to live fully, even if your path becomes different from mine. Daniel never asked me to shrink. He never asked me to prove loyalty by suffering. He never treated my ambition as a threat. He simply walked beside me. And that was enough. I never saw Adrian again. At least, not in person. Years later, I heard that he had devoted the rest of his career to disaster recovery. He worked in places most people avoided. Flood zones, earthquake regions, temporary refugee settlements. He wasn't famous anymore. He didn't need to be. Someone once told me that during an interview, a reporter asked him why he had changed. Adrian supposedly answered, because I finally met the consequences of being the person I used to be. I don't know whether he really said those words. I didn't ask. Some stories don't need confirmation. My own life continued. Daniel and I eventually had a daughter. Her name was Lily. She loved drawing houses. The first time she showed me one, I laughed. It looked terrible. The roof was crooked. The windows were different sizes. The door was floating several inches above the ground. It needs work, I told her. She frowned. You don't like it? I hugged her. I love it. She smiled. Then I'll make another. I kissed her forehead. Make as many as you want. Sometimes, when I watched her draw, I thought about the younger version of myself. The woman who had once believed love meant being chosen. I wished I could sit beside her. I would tell her, you don't have to earn love by becoming smaller. You don't have to stay where you're constantly questioned. You don't have to prove that you're good enough to people who benefit from believing you're not. And most importantly, when someone betrays you, leaving doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes leaving is the first honest thing you do for yourself. One evening, Lily asked me a question. Mom, were you always successful? I laughed. No. Were you always brave? No. Were you always happy? I shook my head. No. She looked puzzled. Then how did you become happy? I looked at Daniel across the room. He was pretending not to listen. I smiled. By learning what happiness wasn't. What wasn't it? Being chosen by someone who didn't respect me. Lily considered this. Then she returned to her drawing. Children have a way of accepting truths adults spend years fighting. That night, after she fell asleep, Daniel and I sat on the balcony. He looked at me. You still think about him? I smiled. Sometimes. Does it hurt? No. I thought about Adrian. The first time I met him. The first drawing. The wedding. The betrayal. The night I left. The hospital. The final goodbye. All of it had become a long road behind me. I don't hate him, I said. Daniel nodded. I know. I don't even want him to suffer. I know. I looked toward the city lights. I just don't belong to him anymore. Daniel took my hand. That sounds like peace. It is. And maybe that was the ending I'd been searching for all along. Not revenge. Not an apology. Not watching Adrian fall apart. Peace. Years ago, when I walked away with one suitcase, everyone assumed I would eventually return. They thought I was emotional. They thought I was angry. They thought I would get tired of struggling and come back to the comfortable life I had left behind. They were wrong. I didn't return. Instead, I built. I built a career. I built communities. I built friendships. I built a family. I built a marriage where love didn't require fear. Most importantly, I built a version of myself that I no longer recognized as the woman who had once begged someone to believe her. The old Mara had been loyal. She had been patient. She had forgiven too much. I don't regret her. She loved with everything she had. But I finally learned that love without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. And I would never abandon myself again. Sometimes people ask me whether I regret the years I spent with Adrian. My answer is complicated. I regret the betrayal. I regret the lies. I regret the years I spent believing I had to earn his love. But I don't regret the lessons, because those lessons brought me here, to this house, to this family, to this life. One evening, I stood in Lily's room while she slept. Her latest drawing was taped to the wall. A crooked little house beneath a huge yellow sun. Underneath it, she had written, "Everyone deserves a home." I smiled. She was right. Everyone deserves a home. Not just a building. A place where they can speak without fear. A place where their dreams aren't treated like inconveniences. A place where they don't have to beg someone to stay. I turned off the light and quietly closed the door. Daniel was waiting in the hallway. "You ready?" I nodded. We walked downstairs together. Outside, the night was calm. I looked back at our home, then forward. For a long time, I believed my greatest victory would be making Adrian regret losing me. But I was wrong. My greatest victory was waking up one morning and realizing I no longer cared whether he regretted it. He had once been the center of my world. Now he was simply a chapter, a painful chapter, an important chapter, but still only a chapter. I had spent years trying to save a man who betrayed me. In the end, the person I needed to save was myself. And once I did, I discovered something beautiful. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him to come back. I didn't even need him to understand. I had built a life he could never take from me. A life filled with purpose. A home filled with love. A future I had chosen. And as I walked beside the man who never asked me to become smaller, I finally understood the truth. Sometimes the bravest way to love someone is to let them go. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming so happy that you no longer need them to regret losing you.